Yeah, I'll probably start early just because of the fact that this session has 5 speakers. So if this is the most speakers of any forum session you're gonna see. So we'll keep the pace up fast so we get the chance to have some quality panel time. But I'm Craig Resnick with ARC, and you've probably seen this enough times, so we won't waste any time with that. This session is really going to talk a lot about unplanned or unscheduled downtime. What are some of the causes, some strategies to try to reduce it, get a little bit into things like virtualization and IoT and how that affects unscheduled downtime, and then a quick wrap up. This is some numbers you've probably seen over the years from ARC, because one of the primary causes of unscheduled downtime is the fact that in some of the plants, it's hard to believe, but still have systems that are 25, 30 plus years old that still work but get supported on eBay for spare parts. And from ARC research, we estimate that number to be about $65 billion worth of systems that work but are in dire need of being replaced. Of those $65 billion worth of systems, 53 billion are 20 years old or older. And just looking at a number from heavy process industries, if we assume that, $1 trillion about $20 billion or 5% of production is lost as a result of just unscheduled or unplanned downtime. You know, some of our research has said 2 to 5% in the petrochemical industries. We had a particular case with a natural gas compression station where they lose $10,000 per hour of downtime for a 2,000 horsepower compressor. When we compare the cost of unscheduled downtime versus scheduled or planned downtime for maintenance, it's a factor of 10 to 1 in cost. So as expensive as it is to bring a plant down for maintenance, obviously it doesn't compare with unscheduled. And just the amount of extra labor you have to make up for that extra time, extra inventory costs, it takes a real big hit on the whole profitability of that line. So it's certainly something we want to avoid. You know, whether it's equipment failure, operator error, or just some nuisance trips. I mean, there's certainly many causes, but sometimes those nuisance trips themselves cause equipment damage. So sometimes healthy equipment gets damaged by a sudden stoppage. Certainly there's issues with worker safety and misproduction. But ultimately, what does it mean? It means lower KPIs and certainly a major hit to the bottom line. You know, the question becomes, of course, is how well you're utilizing your assets, and unscheduled downtime certainly is going to lower any sort of asset utilization figures. It really cries to why we need to have more installations of fault tolerant systems. It also really leads, many times some of the downtime is caused because of human error. And as we get into this world of convergence, and as sometimes in convergence, it's people doing multiple tasks. Sometimes they haven't been trained for those multiple tasks. Sometimes people who are in maintenance functions and in the control room may be doing a common function and haven't been properly trained for the other one that they're adopting. So that certainly has been an influence. Something that can help fight the battle against unscheduled downtime is certainly as you're adopting more standards, from industry standards across the board, certainly are going to help on that line. So certainly at ARC, we're very strongly encourage everybody to adopt industry standards, open standards wherever possible, because we certainly think that's going to help. We certainly have always been very strongly in favor of virtualization, not only for the fact of being able to have more redundancy in the systems, but because now you're limiting the number of servers and uncoupling the fact that when you do hardware upgrades and software upgrades, they can be done independent of each other. It takes less IT staff to support, and because you're running fewer servers, obviously that's going to have a positive impact on your energy costs, I should say. So we're a very strong proponents of virtualization, whether you're using VMware type of solutions, whether you're leveraging companies like Stratus Technologies for their solutions. But the main thing is as is almost planning a downtime strategy. So when something happens, how do you avoid or minimize any sort of data losses? And sometimes what that entails is disaster recovery. And in many times what that is that's just putting a server in a remote location. Now that sounds a lot like cloud, and it is cloud, but it's interesting because in many of our customers that are still against the cloud, they'll say we won't do a cloud solution, but we'll do a disaster recovery solution. So you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's still accomplishing the same thing of making sure that that data is off-site. So if there is any sort of a disaster at the plant, then there's obviously a way to get that data recovered. Obviously, there's going to be some losses between the time of impact and the last time that data was updated or transported. But certainly a disaster recovery solution, which is typically a cloud solution, is certainly helpful. Now, the one thing we find with IT and OT convergence and its impact with unscheduled downtime is, IT certainly many plants where there's still, you're kind of fighting, or you have fought the civil wars between the IT group and the OT group. I think it's certainly gotten better now with convergence, but what people seem to find is sometimes these groups actually have more in common than they differ. They certainly, for cybersecurity, for certainly, trying to increase KPIs, no unscheduled downtime. So I think what we're finding is that this fight for to prevent unscheduled downtime is sometimes a good common denominator as people are trying to work better together between IT groups and OT groups. So in summary, there's a lot of consequences to unscheduled downtime, and I think that as people move towards standardizations, it's also going to help them justify IoT and being able to put in some low-cost sensors, getting information up to the cloud to help as another tool to help know what's going on and be able to predict failures and what could happen in the future. So I think that's also going to be, so IoT will be a positive story to help in the fight against unscheduled downtime, as will continuation of IT-OT convergence.